Tonight, we're diving into a story where the past isn't just recorded, it's still roaming the halls. I'm Jeremy, and tonight I'm joined by Rick Hale, author, investigator, and host of Ask a Ghost Hunter, to explore everything from Chicago's haunted underworld to what really separates poltergeist from other phenomenon. Let's get into it. Welcome, Rick.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show. It was really quite surprising. It's been a while since I've been on one.
Yeah, I'm glad that you came on. I'm excited to dig in and learn a little bit more about your many years in the paranormal.
Okay. Whatever you want to ask.
So, we'll kind of start off with, you've been fascinated by the paranormal since childhood. What was the moment that hooked you kind of into the paranormal?
Well, the moment that really hooked me was I was 8 years old and staying the weekend at my grandparents' house in Franklin Park, Illinois, which is it's one of those like suburban towns that you cross a street, boom, you're in Chicago. So it's kind of like on the far northwestern side of Chicago. Everybody knew that there was something weird about my grandparents' house. It was over 100 years old. And there were things, like weird voices that were heard and footsteps from people that weren't there and the cold breeze that would move around. Late one night, I got up to use the bathroom. This ghost just walked out of my grandparents' bathroom right in front of me. Turns out that it was old Mrs. McNutt, and she was the wife who had passed away 10 years previous. She was the wife of the man that owned my grandparents' building. It's really just burned into my memory. It is a core memory, even at 51 years old. 44 years later, I just remember her looking down at me and saying, "My, what a fine young lad." And then just turning away and then disappearing. And it was like, I know that people are really into those stories that, like, when I was a child, I was terrified by the paranormal and this ghost lived under my bed and frightened me. And it's like, my first experience was anything but. It was very sweet. And, this kindly old ghost lady.
Yeah. And for about 2.5 years, about 20 years ago, I lived in a haunted house for, it
Mhm.
was like 2 or 2.5 years. Most of the time, it wasn't anything, dramatic or anything like that. There was
Right.
just few moments where it was a little freaky, but for the most part, after a while, we kind of got used to it.
Yeah, you really do. I mean, I know that even for myself as an investigator, and I've been on many investigations, I've actually been pretty successful in teaching people how to live with their, what I like to call, breathing impaired roommates rather than getting rid of them. It really has been very, very interesting helping people learn how to cope and learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, we kind of learned on our own. For a while there, we did have my wife's brother and his girlfriend were living with us. They used to stay upstairs. When they moved out, I went upstairs and I just said, "You guys stay up here. We'll stay down there and we won't
Mhm.
have any problems." And that worked until we moved out, pretty much.
Yeah, it's amazing how it works. It's not always as dramatic as they make it out in the movies or in a lot of television shows.
Multiple entities there, but it was, you know, I don't think that most of them were, I wouldn't say any of them were like evil or, you know, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have ever used the D word on them.
Yeah.
That naughty word that,
So
um,
many of us in this field hate to use.
yeah. Can you kind
Mhm.
of walk us through your journey from curious kid that had that first experience to published author and investigator?
Yeah, it was again, and not exactly the most dramatic thing in the world, but after having that first experience, I had to know what it was. I'm very naturally curious and very inquisitive about things, especially when I don't fully understand it. And it was like I needed to know what this was. So I was very lucky. My mom lived in the far northern suburbs of Chicago. My dad lived in Chicago. So I had two really good resources. I had the library where my mom lived and the Chicago Public Library. So I was like, I went to these libraries and took the same books out over and over again. Anything I could find. Huge fan of Hans Holzer and Peter Underwood, where I always say that they're the two greatest teachers that I never knew. And I read everything that I could possibly get my hands on. And then it came my very first investigation when I was 17 in 1991. At that time, I was very much involved in a very fundamentalist evangelical movement. And although I still had my interest in the paranormal, it was kind of filtered through that. So this first investigation was with the girl who was claiming to be attacked by these shadow beings. And, she was visiting with a friend of mine who was involved in this ministry that helped kids get out of occult situations. And, I was provoking spirits before Zach Bagans made it hot and popular.
Mm,
And I was provoking this spirit on this very first investigation, and this huge shadow being just appeared before me and then pushed me down and laughed as it vanished. And back then, I thought, okay, I had dealt with a legitimate demon, but after my deconstruction from that, my deconversion, I really did come to the conclusion that I dealt with a legitimate poltergeist. And this shadow being that appeared in front of me was a thought form that was created by the conduit of the recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis or poltergeist energy. And she felt that I was trying to attack her, and she sent this thought form after me.
yeah,
So, from that point on to, started writing for a Paranormal Underground magazine. And that's where I got my start as a writer. And then I was co hosting that show. And I just kind of went from there. And the people who owned Paranormal Underground magazine asked me to write a book for them. And that's where The Geek's Guide to the Strange and Unusual Poltergeist Ghosts and Demons came from, my very first book.
yeah,
And, just trying to experience various different kinds of haunting phenomena over the years as an investigator. I don't even want to venture a guess on how many investigations that I've been on, but they've been a lot. I don't want to
yeah,
be one of those people that's been like, I've been on 1,000 investigations in my life. I don't want to do that, but I have been on many investigations.
yeah. So on the shadow figure front, I'm in the very early stages, but I'm starting to do a little research on those, collecting some different investigators' evidence that they
Mm.
found of shadow people, photos and videos. It's in the very early stages. I've literally just started a few weeks ago, but shadow figures fascinate me. I really came to want to know more, really, in that area of like what are they, what causes them, different things like that. Right now, I'm kind of in the information gathering stage of everything, but it's fascinating.
What is it? Sure. I mean,
Oh,
I've always kind of come down on the side where shadow figures are involved, where shadow figures are, that they are just human spirits that they don't have the energy or haven't figured out how to fully manifest yet. That's where my thinking is.
you're, yeah. I haven't really came to a conclusion. I don't know if keep trying to keep an open mind on it and, kind
Sure,
of
of
think
course.
back. No, I just figured I'd mention that since you mentioned the shadow figure.
Mhm.
So, going into, you're a strong advocate for disability inclusion in paranormal investigations. What barriers exist in the
Right.
field that most people might not realize are there?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about before we get into that is, how I came to be an advocate for this. I am a disabled person myself. I lost my left leg below the knee to synovial cell sarcoma back in 2016. And it was a shock to me. It's funny because it was like I was given 2 to 6 months to live, but I was actually given 5 years by doing the amputation because the tumor was growing in my ankle. And here I am 9 years later. So I really very much love that. But I really believe that this field is for everyone, regardless of who you are, where you come from, what your beliefs are, sexual preference, all that kind of thing, the
Yeah,
gender, color, it doesn't matter. It belongs to everyone. And I'm a huge believer in that. But I really want to advocate for people with disabilities being involved in this because it's for everyone. If you love this, you shouldn't let something like a disability limit you because really the only thing as a disabled person that limits you is you.
I think that if you can put your mind to it and you want to do it, you should be able to, and you can do it.
Absolutely. See, like I'm very fortunate. I do walk with a prosthetic leg.
Yeah.
So I'm able to wear it for hours and hours and hours and walk around big places, but not everybody can do that. And you're going to have people wheelchair bound. They may be paraplegic or they may be missing both their legs and they have to be in a wheelchair. And I do believe that you can still be a part of it. I mean, you may not be able to do the physical part of it, wandering around a lot of haunted places because a lot of haunted places are very old and they're not exactly disability accessible.
Yeah.
And that really is unfortunate, but that's just how it is. But let's just say the group that you roll with has a nerve center. They have, they set up cameras and they have like a CCTV system. You could be the one that sits in front of those cameras watching the recording and reporting anything that you may see on the video feed. And then you can dispatch people over to that area to take a look at it. If you are a person who is blind, they say that if you lose one sense, the other senses are heightened. You could be if you're blind, you could be the person that listens to electronic voice phenomena. And you're able to just pick out things like that way better than I could. Or if you are a person that is, that if you're deaf, you could be the person that analyzes photographs. So it's like, it doesn't matter what your disability is, you can be a part of this. And I think that that is very important for people with disabilities to understand.
Yeah. I imagine that some of them probably feel that, well, if I can't go, what else is there to do? And you just explain, there's different things that you can do if you're not able to physically
Yeah.
get into the location. So, yeah,
Sure.
that makes perfect sense. Moving on to some of your books. You've written
Yeah.
5 books. I think you mentioned a few of them.
Four.
4. Yeah.
Four. Yes.
I so what in the let's start with the Geek's Guide to Poltergeist, Ghosts and Demons.
Mhm.
What separates a poltergeist from other types of haunting?
Well, poltergeist is not a ghost. That has been a very popular misconception. And I know that over in the UK, they sort of use ghost and poltergeist interchangeably.
Yeah.
They're not exclusive. Well, let's start off with a haunting, with a ghost. You have two different kinds. Of course, you have the stone tape theory, or what we more popularly call residual haunting. This is a spirit entity that is unaware of its surroundings. And it might come up around, you may have a haunting that happens just on Christmas. It's the only time that anybody has ever seen this ghost. It appears, goes about its business, has no awareness whatsoever of its surroundings, and then just disappears. That is just a residual haunting. That is a echo that is captured in time that replays itself. However, with an apparitional or true haunting, this is the identity or the consciousness that has survived the death of the body and is able to manifest itself in various ways, either through smells or through you actually seeing an apparition. But what sets them apart from the other ones is that they are aware of you, the investigator. Are aware of your surroundings and they're able to interact with you.
Yeah.
Now, with a poltergeist, basically what a poltergeist is in parapsychology, they used to call it recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. And what happens is we'll use a balloon, for example. You have a balloon, you fill the balloon up with too much air or too much water, and what happens? The balloon pops and makes a mess. This is kind of what recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis or poltergeist is. It is a person centered. It comes from a person where a person is experiencing so much psychic chaos in their lives that they're able to push that energy out into the environment. And that energy is able to cause all kinds of chaos and havoc. It may seem to be very frightening. I mean, sure, when you have a kitchen like a bull flying at your head or something like that. Yeah, of course, that's going to be very frightening. But it's important to remember that this is not a ghost. This is psychic energy that is completely out of control coming from. It used to be that they, in parapsychology would say it comes from primarily a person who is going through the trials and travails of puberty. But we really kind of know now that that is not true. There was a poltergeist haunting that happened in a lawyer's office in Rosenheim, Germany. And it turns out that upon investigation, they discovered that the poltergeist focus or conduit was a 19-year-old girl.
Oh,
And then in the 1940s in London during World War II, Alma Fielding, she was like a 35-year-old housewife who started to display this out of control psychic ability that, like I said, pushed itself into the physical environment and caused all kinds of chaos for her family and in her house. So we know now, just from these two alone, that it's not just people going through puberty. Usually they used to say young girls, and that's not always the case either. There are many cases where young boys were also the conduit for this psychic energy. We know now that that's not necessarily true, that anybody who is going through a significant amount of psychic trauma and psychic chaos can cause this energy.
yeah, yeah. And I'd always, I hadn't really investigated too much into it, but I'd always heard what you had said. Normally it's someone going through puberty is what,
Yeah.
but it makes sense that it wouldn't be just that.
Yeah.
So next one, kind of, your bullets, booze, and babes, the haunted history of Chicago.
Mhm.
Give Can you give me one location that perfectly captures that title out of your book?
Oh, God. Well, let's start with the bullets. The bullets, of course, being John Dillinger. Everybody loves a good gangster, and John Dillinger is definitely one of them. Gunned down in the alley on the side of the Biograph Theater, which is on Lincoln Avenue. This is one of those, again, this is just a residual haunting or something that has been recorded on the physical environment. He appears, runs down the alley, looks back, and then drops. There's no interaction with anything there. It's just a residual haunting. Another one with the bullets, and also you can put the booze in this one, is, of course, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which happened at the SMC Cartage. It was the 1920s, early 1930s. And of course, that was Al Capone. He wanted to control all of Chicago and killed 7 guys in the SMC Cartage. And the building is no longer there and it hasn't been there for decades. But when you're going past this, where it used to be on Clark Street, people have claimed to hear the sound of gunfire, which I know many people are like, well, it's Chicago. So of course there's gunfire, but allow me to just say it's not as bad as the news makes it out to be. But
Yeah,
people do see apparitions of men wandering around this vacant lot. I've been past this vacant lot so many times now. And I've never actually experienced anything myself, but I do know plenty of people who have. And now for the babes.
mm,
And the babes, we can visit the Irish Legend on the south side of Chicago. And the Irish Legend is a really popular bar. I've been there a few times myself. And back during the days of Prohibition, it was actually used as a brothel and it was
oh,
used as a speakeasy. So a lot of the spirits that are said to haunt this bar and restaurant are the spirits of the girls who died there. They if sometimes, some of these gangsters, they got a little out of control with these young women and killed them. And they used to secret their body out through a series of underground tunnels to waiting cars and then drive away. So
yeah.
there's your bullets, booze, and babes. And really, I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the hauntings in Chicago really do sort of revolve around those three things: organized crime.
Yeah, that's a lot of it because that was, it was big back, in the earlier history during Prohibition, etc. So,
Mhm.
When you're writing, what's your research process? How do you go about that?
I have a pretty extensive library, so I'm able to do my research there, or I research various different websites and try to make sure that everything fits and everything correlates because, when it comes to hauntings, it's a lot of separating historical fact from legend. So I want to try and make it as real as I possibly can, research wise. I'm very much a big believer in honesty, and I'm very much a believer in protecting the integrity of this field and this community. So the last thing I ever want to do is put something out there that is, garbage. So I make
Yeah.
sure that I really get into the nuts and bolts of things.
Okay. Yeah, and you kind of answered my second, how do you verify claims for separating the legend from the documented history?
It's kind of a problem with a lot of these, like a lot of the paranormal TV shows. They don't separate historical fact and legends. They kind of like put it together. And, you know, if you get somebody like myself or other people that are really involved in history, the real history behind it, you can get yourself into trouble and people are going to call you a liar.
Yeah. And there's also some, I'm not going to name names, but some tour groups that kind of do the same that I've found
Yeah.
personally. So,
See, and it's like I get it. I understand that these people, they're out to make money, they're out to show you a good time, they're out to entertain you. But I think that you can make a TV show or a tour group or a documentary or a movie without like bullshit involved. Sorry,
yeah,
pardon my language, but I hope that's okay.
that's
Yeah,
I
I
had a
mean,
lot
you
worse on
can.
my shows.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. But I'll watch it. So I think that you can do these things while protecting your own personal integrity as well as the integrity of the field.
Yeah, I did make one video where there was an error. Someone messaged me privately and let me know, and that video is no longer up. When I used to make separate shorts for my interviews, it was on me. I should have did a little more due diligence of checking, but I learned from that early on.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's going to happen. But like you said, you do your due diligence. If you do your due diligence, you can't go wrong.
No, no. So, I learned from my mistake, and that video is no longer up, and I haven't had a chance to redo it,
There
but
you go.
someday I will.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you've written for a few different magazines. I think you said
Mhm.
Spooky Isles, Paranormal Underground, Supernatural Magazine.
Yes.
What's one story you investigated that was too wild to publish? And did you have any that were not published?
No, I can't say that I have. I mean, for Spooky Isles alone, I don't write for them anymore, but I'm still really good friends with David Saunderson and 275 articles that alone for him that I did. And yeah, I would say that there wasn't anything that was, oh no, I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. Yes, there was one that he would not publish, and it was for very good reason.
No.
It was a one of those, top five kind of things of occult crimes in Britain.
Oh, oh,
Yes.
so
Like murders and stuff like that. And he's like, look, it's a great article. It's very well written, very well researched, but a few of these that are in here, they just happened.
oh,
So he felt that it would be kind of ghoulish if they published that one. And I'm like, you know what? I understand it. These are fairly recent stories, and there are still people grieving. And the last thing I ever want to do is make a grieving person feel worse.
yeah, yeah. So it was really understandable. I just was
Yeah,
curious if that had ever happened. I guess you did have the one example, so that's good.
yeah, I forgot about that, but yeah, thanks for reminding me about that.
So you have Ask a Ghost Hunter on TikTok, I believe.
Yes, I
What's the
do.
most what's the most common question you get, on there from people?
Well, the most common question I get is, "Are you crazy?" No, it's so funny because it's like back in the 90s when people found out that I did this kind of stuff, that was usually like the question that I would get. But I still get that question today. But then they may take me to the side and be like, I have a story to tell you. So it's like,
Yeah,
progress, right? But I'd have to say that the most common question that I've really ever been asked is what the one that we started the show off with was what got me interested in this field. So that is definitely the most common one. But I get a lot of questions about poltergeists and I get a lot of questions about demons. I am not a religious person. So I never really made demons part of my repertoire. But in order to clear up some stuff with some people, I did. A lot of questions I'll get about psychic phenomenon. Are, is psychic phenomena real? To that, I say yes. Are we all born psychic? To a greater or lesser degree, I think so. I think some of us, I have a very well developed sense of situational awareness. I could really walk into a place and feel like this doesn't feel right to me. So, but I'm also really good at reading body language as well. It's like a gift of mine. But yeah, it's questions like that that are very common.
can you were on Ghost Tapes too? What was that
Yes.
like?
It's funny because it's like that was just completely by accident. That was not even supposed to happen. So here's what happened. I saw the very first ghost tapes and I emailed the creator, Luke Millett. And I told him, I'm like, hey, I really liked ghost tapes and I would love to invite you on an investigation. And he's like, okay. So he comes to my house. He's from Brookfield, Illinois. He lives out in Colorado now. And he comes to my house and he pulls out this paperwork. And he's like, here, I need you to sign these things. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm going to be making a Ghost Tapes 2 and you're going to be in it. Like, I never even thought in a million years that I would be in front of a camera. I'm not interesting enough to to be on TV or in a documentary or whatever. At least I don't think I am. A friend of mine says I'm way too self-deprecating. So yeah, I took him on this investigation. It was to a woman's house in Fox Lake, Illinois. We were meeting up with a psychic that I had been working with for a few years, Nancy Laporta. One of the people I could say has a legitimate supernatural gift. I mean, she really does. She's
Oh,
extraordinary, actually. So we investigated this woman's house. It was added into the documentary. But yeah, totally by accident. It wasn't even my intention. My intention was just a, hey, I love your work. You want to hang out,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And it turned into me being in this. And then I was in, I think, 3 or 4 episodes of Ghost Tapes, the series. One of the ones that was a real standout for me was the Arcata Theater in St. Charles. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the Arcata Theater in St. Charles, Illinois is very, very haunted. An interesting little thing to note when we filmed that, I had an abscess tooth. So if you really look very closely at me, the left side of my face is swollen.
Oh,
I was in so much pain, but the show must go on. And the very next day, I had that abscess tooth pulled. But yeah, that was a really interesting experience. And that was like my first and probably will be my last time in front of a camera in that context. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed doing it.
oh, that's great. I thought it was interesting. Was it any different than what you would normally do in an investigation when you were doing it, recording it? Did you handle it any differently, or was it exactly the same?
No, no, Luke was very much invested in the integrity of this field and community as I am. And
Okay.
that's one of the things that I really loved working with him on this is because it was like what you see on camera is exactly what happened. There was nothing that was faked or hoaxed or whatever. It was like everything was very, very real. He doesn't do paranormal type documentaries anymore. He is a professional filmmaker. Unfortunately, I lost touch with Luke, so I'm not really aware of what it is that he's doing these days.
Okay. Now, when you in your investigations, what's your personal investigation kind of methodology? when you're investigating? Do you have a certain equipment that you swear by?
Yeah. I always say first and foremost, my favorite tool in my investigator's bag is my brain and my senses. I trust them completely.
Very true. Yeah,
So I'm very old fashioned and very old school in my approach to the paranormal. Yes, I do use the equipment that people use. I use dowsing rods, I use EMF and gauze meters and stuff like that. But, my teachers were British investigators from the old school days. And really, the thing that you really just kind of you just waited to see if something would happen. They used to call it sitting vigil. I really do like that. I mean, sure, of course, I'll interact and use gear and stuff like that. But man, when you really just open up your senses and when you're in a place, I think that is the most important thing that you can use on an investigation. I know that for the longest time, especially in the early days of the modern paranormal era, personal experience was secondary to the evidence. And that's just not true because without the personal experience, why bother investigating? It's the
yeah,
personal experience that sparks that exploration. So to me, that is the most important thing.
very true. And over your years, has your belief or your techniques evolved or changed at all when you first started to now?
Like I said, my very first investigation, I was, very much a born again Christian, but I've gotten away from that many, many years ago. Like we're talking like 1994 was the year I started deconstruction on that. From that to what I have now, I'm very much more into parapsychology than pop paranormal. Invested a lot of time and energy in learning more about parapsychology. And that's not just about ghosts, that's also about psychic phenomenon, about consciousness. I want to know it all and I want to learn it all and I want to experience it.
So, what would you say over the years of investigating? What was your most compelling evidence that you personally experienced that you just couldn't explain away?
So you're going to see my wife and my son come through the door.
Oh, that's
And
fine.
so at an investigation at a house in Waukegan, this was quite possibly the most haunted house, haunted private residence that I've ever been in. In fact, there's a chapter in my book, Shocking True Tales of Terror and some other spooky stuff, in the chapter called The House of 100 Spirits. And I called it that because I literally do believe that there were 100 spirits in this house. And I'll tell you why in a second. The most interesting experience that I ever had with this, an investigator and I, we were in the kitchen and we were talking to the homeowner's mother, who the haunting seemed to revolve around for whatever reason. And we're sitting there talking, and I look up, and all of a sudden, this woman in what this tall blonde haired woman dressed in what looked like white nurses scrubs all of a sudden just appeared. I mean, it's like she wasn't there and then she was there. You know what I'm saying? Like she just appeared out of thin air. And so I grabbed another investigator. Her name was Vicky. And I'm like, did you see that? And she's like, yeah, I did. So I watched as this apparition turned into this bedroom off to the left. And so we walked down the hall, and there's a bedroom to the left, and there's a dining room to the right. And we go into this bedroom, and the only people in the bedroom are two girls. The one girl was the daughter of the homeowner, and the other girl was her friend. Now it's going to become very important. It adds context to what it is that we saw. The family who owned the home they were Armenian, so they were very olive colored skin, dark hair, and her friend was African American. She was black. So we walked in the room, and they're the only two people in there. There's nowhere for a tall, blonde haired white woman to be in this room. And we walk in, and I said to the girls, I'm like, like, where did that woman go? And she's like, well, what woman? I was like, it's a tall white woman dressed in nurse's scrubs. And the homeowner's daughter looks at me and says, you saw her too? So we're standing in the bedroom and all of our meters are just pinging like crazy. And I'm looking across the hall at the dining room that's over there, across from the bedroom, and all of a sudden I just see like this dark shadow just book it right through right down the hall,
Aw.
towards the front room. Now, here's where it gets interesting and why I believe that this house had a 100 spirits in it. So they had this huge bay window in the front room, the living room. So we go in there, we're investigating. I mean, like the room is super cold, everything is pinging, and we got voice recorder rolling. And I ask the question, how is it that you come into this home? Later on, upon review of this evidence, we hear a very spooky voice say they want us to come in through the window.
Oh,
So this window, I believe, was acting as a portal for these entities to come and go at will in this house. And I really honestly do believe to this day that that house was infested with ghosts.
wow. Yeah, that what is your thoughts on portals? Do you think that there's as many as, 'cause a lot of places claim they have portals. Do you think that they're as common as what some places advertise?
I don't think it's as common as places advertise because I do believe that there are two different kinds of portals. I believe that there are portals that are naturally occurring, that for some reason the veil between our world and the spirit world is just very, very thin and they're able to come through. And I do believe that there are other portals that can be opened through occult or magical means. And I do believe that this in this house was a naturally occurring portal. Um, but no, I don't believe that it's as common as the entertainment side of the paranormal would
Yeah.
have you believe.
How does audio
Mhm.
storytelling compare to written work for paranormal content? How does that kind of compare, like when you're writing compared to being on doing a podcast or
Well, I
storytelling?
think that when you're telling the story on a podcast, people can see your passion for it. I have been told that even in my writing and my storytelling, that it is passionate as well. But I think that passion through audio or through video, that passion really comes out much greater.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that you can really see when you're speaking it, you can see the passion more than in writing. You can't, I think some authors are very good at putting it in paper, but I think that
Mhm.
doing a podcast, you can really see that person's passion for what they're doing.
Right.
Looking across all your books and investigations, is there a common thread or theme you keep finding?
No. And the thing is, it's this is called spontaneous phenomenon for a reason. I can never really find common is that there's always something new. There's always something different to explore. There's always something to investigate. And I do believe that is what has been keeping me coming back since 1982. It's just how incredibly unexplained and spontaneous all this phenomena really is.
What location or case are you dying to investigate that you haven't got to yet?
I would really love to investigate the Woodstock Opera House in Woodstock, Illinois. The movie Groundhog Day was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois, rather than Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. There is a scene where it shows Phil Connors, of course, Bill Murray, jumping from what looks like a clock tower, but that's not actually a clock tower. That is the Woodstock Opera House. It's the big steeple
Oh,
that is at the top of it. And the story goes that the actress Elvira was so distraught that she threw herself out that same window. It was kind of like a callback to this alleged haunting that happens there. I'd have to say that that is the place that I am dying to
Mm.
investigate because you hear a lot of different stories that it really is haunted, but then you also hear the story that the story of Elvira and the ghost was made up by Orson Welles when he was there doing a series of plays. So again, you have historical fact and legend. You kind of got to separate the two. And that is what I am dying to do at the Woodstock Opera House.
Yeah, yeah. So, if someone's new to paranormal investigation, what's your advice for approaching it seriously and safely?
Forget everything you see on TV because that is not how it is. There is no such thing as a scare minute. Real investigation. It can actually be very boring. You're you're sitting in a dank basement for hours on end, just waiting for something to happen. It can be very boring, but when you finally do get that evidence, it can be very rewarding as well. Another piece of evidence that I give to somebody, you're not always going to get that earth shattering evidence upon your first visit. You're going to have to go back many, many times and invest a whole lot of time in a lot of these places, just to even so much as get a breath on a voice recorder that you can't explain. It's not a scare minute. You're not always going to get the greatest evidence, but that's not to say it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
because it does happen. It's just kind of one of those being in the right place at the right time kind of things. But I think the biggest piece of advice is forget everything you think you know. Peter Underwood. These are these were great parapsychologists. Guy Lyon Playfair. These were great parapsychologists, great investigators. Harry Price, too, is another good one. Read their books, read their work, and that is where you're going to get a solid education.
Okay. And a little bit different aspect of things. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone who thinks their home might be haunted?
My first piece of advice, don't be afraid. Because seriously, 9 times out of 10, if you have an intelligent haunt in your house, it really is just somebody trying to make contact with you. They're just trying to get a message across. That's all they're doing. It may seem scary because it's like, well, this person's invisible or they appear in front of you and then disappear. But that doesn't mean that they're trying to scare you. They're just trying to communicate. And that is the one piece of advice that I would give to somebody. Don't be afraid. But if the activity in your house is out of control and does take on a more, I don't want to use the word sinister, but for lack of a better term, a sinister sense, then it would be time to find yourself a reputable paranormal investigator. And don't just go with somebody I've been doing this for 5 years. No, go with somebody who has the field experience, who has the research experience, that has been involved in this field and community for not just a few years, but even decades
Yeah.
would be my best advice.
Okay. And just one more question for you before we wrap things up. What's next for Rick Hall? Do you have any new projects, investigation books?
I think Rick Hale is kind of done with the book writing. I'm done
Yeah.
doing that part. Yeah. I think 4 is a good solid round number. So I think I'm going to be done there. I haven't really been doing any writing. It's kind of hard to find the time for that now
Yeah.
because I did a large body of my work when I was on disability after losing my leg. So now I have a regular job that I go to every
Yeah.
day. I just want to continue doing what I'm doing with TikTok and my socials and videos and hitting the road with Rick and my good friend Ray Porton. You're going to be seeing a lot more of those as well. We're going to be visiting some more haunted places and, putting it out there for whoever wants to watch them.
Yeah. Yeah. Rick, it's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Before we completely wrap things up, can you tell everyone where they can find your books or where they can follow you, your socials and stuff? I will put everything in the description below as well. But
You can follow me on my socials. My TikTok is going to be Common Sense Paranormal Media. Again, that's Common Sense Paranormal Media TikTok. You can watch the videos of Ask a Ghost Hunter or anything else that I decide to put on there, or On the Road with Rick and Ray. You can see those videos as well. You can find me at Instagram at author Rick Hale. You can also find me over at Facebook, just Rick Hale. I'm very accessible for anybody who may have any questions that they want to ask. You can follow me there on those three places. You can find my books at Amazon. They're still available. Ziggy's Guide to the Strange and Unusual, Poltergeist, Ghosts, and Demons. Behold, Shocking True Tales of Terror, and some other spooky stuff. Bullets, Booze, and Babes. And the very final book, and the last one, is Ghost Watch.
Okay. Well, I will make sure I put everything in the description so that people can just click the link and find you and connect. And if they want to buy some of your books, that'd be great as well.
Thank you.
Um, and so also to everyone out there, if you've enjoyed this conversation, hit the subscribe button, check out my previous episodes exploring haunted history. And remember, history never truly dies. It just finds new ways to haunt us. Till next Saturday, keep digging into the darkness.